Elizabeth, at what level should any lawmakers at any level be involved in this discussion?
So I tend to be pretty libertarian, and I would think at no level. I don't think this should be a legal issue. I think that what should happen is um, at the local levels, we should be working to increase uh, supportive communities and networks for anyone who just finds out that they're pregnant and that they need help. Um, to me, that is not what the pro-life movement is currently, but I um, ideally that would be ultimately what would happen. I mean, I have often thought that abortion is a very strange issue for both sides because um, conservatives tend to be for small government, and that would tend to mean that they shouldn't be involved in abortion. They shouldn't be involved in many things. And I'm consistent in this. I don't think it should be legislated. It is something that involves I'm an attorney, and most people who are legislators are attorneys, and that means that they probably have very little understanding of both medicine and ethics. So that was a joke. Um,
Not
but
a joke.
wisdom. Um, so I don't think that I wouldn't want a legislator to work on abortion or legislating abortion, because I don't think that they're well equipped to do so. And I'm a libertarian, and I think people should be allowed to do what they want, especially when it comes to their own bodies. But I think where legislation and government could help is in providing, maybe not providing services, because again, that's more of a big government type of thing, but in um, supporting, in some sort of supportive role for organizations that help those with unexpected, unplanned, dangerous pregnancies.
Okay. Breyette, your response?
It's interesting because
Or
I wasn't expecting
your
to have this
opinion?
response. I'm going to say it. I feel like I kind of disagree with that, and that I do think that politicians should be involved to protect what local communities might take away from women's ability to seek medical care at the local level due to religious or other influences. I think that it can be possible for local culture to, unfortunately, try to suppress women's ability to do all kinds of things. I mean, especially medically throughout medical history, and it's, especially with respect to obstetrics and gynecology. Women have been fighting for a long time to gain increasing control over whether or not they're sterilized, whether or not they can be assaulted when they're married, whether or not um, they can they have to have hysterectomies or lobotomies because they have strong personalities. I mean, we still have continued work to do that I think needs to be safeguarded at more than local levels, at state or national levels, to make sure that women's rights are protected. Um, but maybe that does line up with being a blue, with more like government interference, as people would say, huh? I don't know.
And Elizabeth, what do you think about? Do you think you disagree with anything she said, or agree, or what do you line up?
Well, I just don't think that the government could intervene. I mean, you are, if you're in a religious community and they're against abortion, I'm not entirely sure how the government can say, here, we're going to break you out of this community, or if it's your parents that are keeping you and you don't have car transportation, I'm not entirely sure how the government could do that. And I think it's just, I don't want the government to have the power to, I think that opens up even more, um, even more potential problems if I think let's say I would say it's like your parents or the people who are most likely to prevent you from having an abortion would be the people that know you. So it's like and have some sort of control over you, like perhaps your parents or the father. And if the government has some way of getting in between you and your parents, or you and the father of the child, I don't know what that would look like. But I'm a little afraid of that.
Okay. And Breyette, do you want to have a rebuttal to that at all?
Yeah, I think I wasn't necessarily talking about interfering in like personal relationships, but just like in general. Um, I didn't read the news as much this week, but I think I saw was it Ohio that had passed near total ban on abortions throughout the state, or was working on it this week. And what I mean about kind of legislative levels or legal levels, I mean preventing counties or cities or states from saying this is a place where women's autonomy doesn't matter as much, that other things matter instead. And I think that there does need to be some kind of a national setting of a point that says here, you know, kind of what Roe v. Wade did, say, you know, women get to have this right to privacy. They get to have this choice because that's the way it's going to go. And I feel like without some kind of government interference, or without some kind of government um, legislative action, that rights of women would be chipped away at the local level, from shutting down of clinics to denying or shaming medical providers, or women in general. I think that we are not to the point yet where if we say there are no laws on the books at all, and we will just trust that the right thing happens as far as women's health goes across the country. We're not there yet, I don't think. I still think we need clear protections articulated by politicians and other people in power.
Elizabeth, where do you draw the line on clear protection versus, government sort of overreach, as you discussed earlier?
Well, I think that Breyette's thing makes sense if you believe that the government will only protect rights. But if you have that opportunity, if you give the government the right to say we're not going to have, I need to present again. So don't say anything to me because I won't hear you. I think if you give the ability to say you cannot pass any kind of legislation to prohibit abortion, then you also give the government the right to take it away. And again, as Brand said, we're not at this point where we would really expect or trust the government to say, we're just going to expand abortion rights. So if you give a government that power, it has that power to give, and also has that power to take away. To me, it's like when I heard this analogy about gay marriage, and they said banning gay marriage is like if a man orders a salad in a restaurant and someone intercepts the waiter and says, no, he's going to have the soup. And that was to say that I'm going to bungle this up, but like he shouldn't have the right to say he can't have the salad. And I think the point they were trying to make is that I think the point, the thing that I thought was weird with gay marriage is that it seemed like what we were going for was not that person who interrupts the waiter and says he can't have that, but that we have someone interrupting the waiter to say, yes, he will have the salad, because that other person, what we're doing with, yes, they can get married, yes, no, they can't get married, is we're giving someone control over something that they have no control over. Like when you order something in a restaurant, no one gets to say whether you can or cannot do anything. And what we've done is we've had, people, we were having referendums in the fight for gay marriage, like, yes, we approve of this. And I thought the libertarian case for this is that no one should weigh in on this. Like the government should not weigh in at all. And because it's possible that the government would weigh in the other way, that it's say gay marriage would be banned. And to me, this is none of the government's business. They can go one way or the other. And I don't know which way they're going to go. And I don't want them to have that choice.
Breyette, your response. What do you think about that analogy?
So I think some things, I think a salad sounds great. I love salads, but I think some things shouldn't be on the menu. I don't think a mom gets to decide that her week-old baby shouldn't exist. I think that's murder. I do think that a woman should be able to say, I'm going to take contraceptives because I don't want to get pregnant. And where that line morphs between clearly personal choice and murder is tricky, right? And lots of people reasonably disagree. I don't think that the government should never weigh in on moral issues like this. I think that as a democratic society, we have a responsibility to say this is the kind of morality, these are the kinds of laws that we want to be enforced in our country. And that has changed. I mean, ethics has changed. What's right and wrong has changed in our country's history. You shouldn't be able to order otter on the menu or muskrat. Those are protected animals, right? We're not going to do that. But salads are great. I love salad. Should, a minor who's been sexually assaulted never be able to have an abortion? I mean, some people, that's a what-ifism, right? Like that's an extreme example. But there are probably some examples where we could say, maybe always, if a mother's going to die and she knows that she's pregnant, but only 2 days pregnant, and there's been no implantation yet, she can choose not to get pregnant because she knows she's going to die. The mother's life or the fetus's life, you got to choose one. I don't think it's always true that you get to choose the fetus at the mother's expense. And not many people do make that choice. But when do you get to, where does that fuzzy line become clearly the mother can't make that choice after viability, 8.5 months, 9 months? Really tricky questions. And I know that, again, the spectrum is going from, I think most people reasonably say a woman should not be forced to have a baby, not be forced to get pregnant, to she's not allowed to kill her babies once they're born. Like when that happens, and I do believe that we need to organize and say to our politicians and to our state legislators, this is what we would like to see happen in terms of a woman's ability to control what happens in her own body. In 2020, this is where we stand. The cutoff is here, is it first trimester? Enough people maybe get together and say first trimester. Roe versus Wade says first trimester. Seems to be pretty clearly the mother's choice. Third trimester has to be compelling. It's much trickier third trimester, but I again would hope that the conversation is more tilted in terms of energy and in terms of money and power on the side of encouraging people to choose life, encouraging people to choose, to be able to choose to have healthy, viable pregnancies, and to not choose abortion.
I think it's just an intractable problem about size of government. And we have different opinions on this. And to me, I guess as, my family is from China. So we are, in certain ways, it has turned us extremely libertarian because we have seen what happens when, and, we're Chinese, and obviously the people in charge in China are Chinese too. So there are people that are quote unquote like us making decisions for us. And we didn't like this. We didn't like any part of this. And now that we're in America or a minority, we especially don't want people making choices for us. And it's a complicated issue, and there are all sorts of different scenarios. And I don't think that having more laws and especially the people who would lobby to get these laws, the people who are more connected. I think there might be compromises, there might be things that are difficult. And I think as we talk about like women having the choice to control their bodies, people's bodies and situations are so unique. And I would much rather, obviously there are pros and cons to each side, and you can weigh your pros and cons differently, and you come out with different results. And again, that's good. And it's just, I wouldn't want a legislature to talk to lobbyists and pass a bill, and then someone with their pregnancy, with their doctor, can't make the decision that is best for them because it's violating some law, and maybe they're that random case that no one thought of or no one expected. Of course, there will be some downsides of not having legislation. There are also downsides of having legislation. And this is such a personal issue. And I think, and it's such a one person at a time issue that, we're not trusting communities to care for, to act in the best interest. We're not necessarily, we're wary of parents not acting in the best interest of some of these children. So at least those people know the situation here. And now we're trying to say, like, these legislators and maybe people who care about this, they might know better about what's going to happen in the future to little girls. I mean, obviously there are pros and cons, and just in my point of view, again, I live outside of Washington, D.C., so the federal government is a huge, some would say, menace. It's just, it's our industry. And there are some things that go well, and there are some things that don't, but I don't want other people, my personal opinion is that it would be better not to have involvement of other people in such a personal choice. But I can understand that other people would have different views. And my libertarian views are pretty out there, pretty much like beginning of the country settling and I understand that this is unpopular. And so I don't expect anyone to agree with my opinions. And I guess that's part of the appeal of Braver Angels is I don't think generally my opinions don't make sense, but I think that they're not popular. They're not views that anyone necessarily would take. And I think I would be okay with less legislation. I don't think that's actually the world we live in, but in my ideal world, if that's what we're talking about, and I think when we have these discussions, we are talking about what we're moving towards. I'd rather have less legislation and suffer the consequences of less legislation and protection in exchange for not having legislation that might negatively affect people in the future.
If I could summarize real quick where I think where you two line up, a very general summary, Breyette, you do believe in autonomy for women to make the choices, but you do believe in some level of government to make it safe to make those choices and provide those rights to a certain degree. But you would push toward as few abortions as possible. And where Elizabeth, you would say as few laws as possible to legislate the situation at all, to leave the choices to a free and reasonable society at large for the most part. Is that fair at all to summarize your points, Breyette?
Well, it was a little bit of an oversimplification because
Okay.
there are a number of things to consider. Autonomy is one, but beneficence is another. Like, what is the most good outcome for the different stakeholders involved, for the mother, for the parents, for the father, for the fetus itself, for society, and what kinds of actions would result in the least amount of harm, and what kind of, I mean, if you want to talk about legislative positioning, what kind of government stances can result in the most fairness, the most equity, the most justice. So I don't want to emphasize personal autonomy without acknowledging that there are other important principles at play. And I think that, it's a kind of a contradiction, right? Because I do think that I firmly believe that government shouldn't be involved in these personal choices. I think for me, that's the definition of pro-choice. The government should not be in the business of legislating what kind of choice I get to make as a woman or what kind of choices women get to make in general.
Thank you for watching the Unity Now podcast. We'll be back with another conversation that highlights the political middle ground to unite Americans and end the ideological war. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and hit that subscribe button.